Governor Cooper, it's always good to be in the same room with you, even the virtual room. So I appreciate you making time to be with us today. You're currently serving your second term as governor. I'm excited to hear ways from which you've worked to make connections across the entire education continuum, as well as between education and other sectors. Recently, I'm sure you'll plug this, but North Carolina #1 for business. So congratulations on your great leadership. I'd like to start, though, with a place you've been leaning in here in the state of North Carolina. And I think many are seeing you as a national, emerging national leader as it relates to educator workforce. The first question is, you've made it a priority of your administration to increase the diversity of North Carolina's educator workforce. Can you talk a little bit about why this issue was so important to you and to North Carolina?
Absolutely, Javaid, and thank you very much for spending some time with me today. And thank you to the Hunt Institute for the tremendous forum that you provide for leaders in education, and always forever grateful to the greatest governor in the history of our state, Governor Jim Hunt, grateful for his leadership and guidance and never-ending passion for public education in this state. As we emerge from COVID, we know that the challenges that we have already faced have been exacerbated. And I think it's never been a tougher time to be an educator, a student, or a parent for that matter. One thing we know is we want our public schools to be effective. So recruiting quality teachers and making sure we fill that teacher pipeline is really critical. But as we see our student population continuing to be more diverse, and we see the data coming in showing us that not only do diverse students of color, but all students do better when their teachers are diverse, then we need to be intentional about making sure that quality teachers that we recruit to our school system are diverse. And we've not seen the corresponding increase in diversity in who's standing in front of the classroom as who's in the classroom. So I created the Drive Task Force in order for us to find ways to recruit more diverse teachers into the education profession. And what an eye-opening experience that has been for me personally. My mom was a teacher. I'm a product of public schools. My children are products of the public schools. But I encourage everyone who's listening to this to read the Drive Task Force report, and particularly read the perspective of diverse teachers of color throughout North Carolina, things that we never even dreamed of, those of us who aren't walking in their shoes, of what they experience and the pressures that they experience in being teachers of color in our public school system. Things like everybody expecting you to carry the ball with certain students and for you to set a certain example. And those pressures that are on our teachers of color are immense. This task force talks about that. It talks about strategies on how to deal with that. It has set forth an agenda on how we recruit more diverse teachers into our workforce, how we attract them. I think that the work of this task force is not only going to help us diversify our teaching profession, it's going to help us overall in public education and make us better. And I look forward to the second iteration of this. We started it just before the pandemic. They continued to drive right through the pandemic. I use the word drive, and continued to work. Many of them met each other for the first time a few months ago in person, but they had spent a lot of time together on these kinds of calls. It's really exciting. I think it's a national model, and we look forward to success.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that sort of perspective. You sort of touched on this, but the task force, the makeup of the task force includes representatives from districts, teacher prep programs, if parents, parent voices obviously is always important to include. You have some policymakers. Why was it important for you to have those voices at the table in order to move this work forward?
So it is critical to have the support of everybody who's involved, and those parental voices, parent voices, are very important in all of this. You know, we've been working very hard to attract more Black males into the teaching profession. We know the role models that they can be in our schools, and I think the agenda that the task force has put forward, more scholarship money to try to attract people, better training, you know, finding different ways for teachers to get into the teaching workforce. We're at crisis mode now on attracting enough teachers into our system, period. We need to continue to do that, but we also need to work to make sure that we have the kind of teachers that reflect that student population. And we know the science is pretty clear that that makes better students out of everybody.
So you just referenced also, we had our second annual summit. This one, we were in person again. It was a great, well-attended, great representation from all over the state. It's a room full of the right people having the right types of conversations. What do you see as sort of the next steps of the Drive Task Force? What are you hoping to see from the task force?
More implementation now. I think this is something that can happen at the local level. I think it also can happen at our universities, our State Board of Education, and I think our businesses can become more involved in this effort. I think getting out the word of how important this is and the plan that the task force has laid out is absolutely crucial. You know, for example, when Teaching Fellows scholarships were reviewed and reinstated after I think they had been working so well, and the legislature stopped them for a few years, took them away from the public school forum, and then reconstituted them. There was not a single HBCU that you could get a Teaching Fellow scholarship for. And now we have broadened that. And I think it's critically important that we use scholarships and reward people for being willing to get into the teaching profession with those scholarships, and we get those teachers out into the classroom. There's a lot of implementation work that needs to be done, and I'm looking forward to the task force leading that effort.
So we're actually in the throes of, we launched after the first task force. We sort of took this model that you brought together and we sought some philanthropic partners. And now we've launched in partnership with a host of partner organizations across the country, something we're referring to as the 1 Million Teachers of Color Initiative. So I know our friends at the Reagan Summit, the attendees are going to hear more about that shortly, but I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the fact the impetus for this national call to action, similar to what you're talking about, Governor, the classroom's not reflective of the communities they're serving. We know nationally we have about 1 million teachers across the country that we need to place in classrooms to make sure the classrooms are reflections of the community. So I want to thank you for your leadership. I know Governor Hunt would be very proud of the impact you've had on this conversation as it's really taking off nationally. That said, let me pivot to something else that you've been working and your administration has been doing great work in student health and well-being. The mental and emotional health of our students is something we're all talking about in the entire field of education. We're all concerned about it. We know our students' mental health was certainly significantly impacted over the last 2 years due to disrupted learning and in some cases loss of loved ones. How have you engaged partners in North Carolina to build supports for student mental health?
This pandemic has affected us negatively in many ways. And one way that it has hit us especially hard is mental health of our young people. Having to deal with the stress and strain of everyday life is tough enough as it is, and particularly our kids who are growing up in marginalized communities and lower income homes. On top of this, with the pandemic on top of all of that, it has been very tough on them. You know, we've seen overdoses go up. We've seen suicides go up. We've seen more stress on our students. We have to pick up the ball and tackle this head on. One of the things that I've done with GEAR money is work on training people to recognize symptoms and concerns among students. And this is training teachers and other students and people who would have interactions with students to try to get intervention and help to those students as quickly as possible. We are very close in North Carolina to expanding Medicaid. We're losing $521 million a month by not expanding Medicaid in North Carolina. And now we have finally agreement among Republicans and Democrats in the leadership in both the House and the Senate. Every month that goes by, people get sicker, people lose their lives, and we lose that $421 million a month. Expanding Medicaid will increase mental health providers and will increase more opportunities for young people to get evidence-based mental health treatment and help them through this crisis. We also need to make sure that our students get a sound basic education as required by our Constitution. And part of that is funding for more school psychologists, school nurses, counselors, others who are looking at the whole child and understanding that we just can't tell our teachers to heal all these children and make them smart and learn everything and take care of all of the problems that they have pressing on them. We can't expect them to do that. We need to use our schools as foundations to help provide that help to students now. It's critical, and I'm going to continue on the effort. And in fact, our National Governors Association, the bipartisan organization, this is going to be youth mental health is going to be the main priority of that organization this year. And I think we're going to see a lot of efforts coming down. We need it desperately, and I look forward to working on those.
Thank you, Governor. Another issue that sort of surfaced or got a brighter light shined on it was broadband internet access in regards to the pandemic. This is a prime example of an issue that exists outside of the traditional reach of education, but which has a profound impact on our students' ability to learn. Your office has done some unique work to improve broadband access in North Carolina. What would you tell us about your approach?
So Governor Hunt and I are both Presbyterians, and Presbyterians have to find something good out of something bad. This pandemic was something bad. The good thing that came out of it is, for the very first time, we now have the resources to connect every household in North Carolina to high-speed internet access. In North Carolina, we've used part of the American Rescue Plan funds that we had, and we have more money coming down from the bipartisan infrastructure plan. And are we glad to see it? Because high-speed internet access is critical to families in North Carolina. We got about 81% of our households with children who are connected to decent broadband right now. It needs to be 100%, because already children who don't have that access are starting behind. You know, as we move to more remote learning during the pandemic, and some of it is going to stay with us, we must make sure that every child has the opportunity. So our IT department is working on a great grants program to connect all homes to high-speed internet access. We know it's important to education. We know it's important to healthcare, telemedicine, and particularly mental health is an area where high speed is delivering health access to people that they normally didn't have before. And third, it helps connect our small businesses to global markets. And I'm excited about laying that fiber and making sure that we hardwire everybody and give them the opportunity. But that doesn't mean if we get fiber laid and get the opportunity there, it doesn't mean that every family is going to get connected, because some people can't afford the connection fee. Some people don't have the devices, and some people don't know how to use those devices. So we're working hard on the Affordable Connectivity Program that the federal government has allowed to give people $30 a month to help get them connected. And we're looking at supplemental funding for that to happen. Working on funding to get devices to people and to provide community centers and other ways for people to get training. I was in one the other day in Durham, and a grandmother and her grandchild came in. Both of them needed training on how to use their devices. We know that high-speed internet access is an absolute necessity now. And our goal is to get all households with school-age children connected, and making sure that they can afford to be connected, that they have the devices and the know-how.
So I'd like to hear more about your administration, the connections making between education and the workforce. I referenced earlier, North Carolina was #1 for business. And I think that's something I'd love to hear you elaborate on. You have to certainly be proud of that. It's a huge accomplishment. But during your first term, you led the charge in launching an ambitious post-secondary attainment goal. And reading about your perspective of the #1 business ranking, I think you give a lot of acknowledgement to the role higher education and post-secondary plays and the workforce that you are leading and cultivating here in North Carolina. But 2 million North Carolinians attaining a high-quality degree or credential by 2030 was the goal that you were in part leading. We know that in order to meet this goal, a number of public and certainly private entities across the entire state will need to come together and create a pipeline of students moving through the continuum and hopefully onto the workforce. How have you approached fostering connectivity across the education and workforce landscape?
Well, I'm very proud that CNBC, which is a very respected listing, for the first time ranked North Carolina the #1 place for business in the country. There are 88 factors that CNBC looks at, not just business environment, but also educational opportunities, workforce, healthcare, diversity and inclusion. It's a whole list of items that they look at. And I think success has many parents here. I think we all, first and foremost, I would give the credit to the people of North Carolina, because I think the people are what makes us great. But there's no question that we probably have the greatest array of public and private universities in the country that has been built up over the decades in our state. That, and I believe the best community college system in the country, has helped us make for a workforce that I think is second to none. Now, we have a lot to do, and we have a lot of erosion that's occurring. Particularly, we need to invest more in early childhood and K through 12, and making sure we have quality early childhood education. Those things are critically important in the long run. But for right now, we need to make sure that we have the workforce of today and tomorrow. And I am excited about the future, because we have to be adaptive to the new kinds of jobs that we are seeing now. And our state, I believe, with those investments over the years, is poised to take off. We've created so many great paying jobs. Now we need to get people the training and the education in order to fill them. That's what keeps me up at night. The companies are coming, and we're excited about that. And we're a growing state. But making sure we can fill all those jobs is a challenge, but that also just creates a lot of opportunity for people.
While reflecting on your accomplishments and lessons learned, what is one lever of change that every aspiring education governor should work towards to better connect their education system to employability?
Yeah, and I think connecting those two is critical. That is an ever evolving world of connecting education to the workforce. And I think it's critical that we continue to be on top of that. In North Carolina, we started nccareers.org, which is a website that you can go to. And you can pretty much look up any career you may be interested in, and you'll discover all kinds of jobs that you may not even know existed. And what you'll learn about that job is how much education is required to get that job, how much that education would cost, what our starting salary for that job would pay, what can you expect to make over time. We want to get our businesses involved early in the classroom, making sure our North Carolina Business Committee for Education has put a platform together to work to do that. I think we need to revive, and it's already happening, apprenticeships and work-based learning, where we're doing more connecting with education and the workplace, and making sure that these businesses know that we have a talented and diverse workforce. When I didn't finish my thought about success has many parents, I do believe that when you have a state legislature that will work with you, a business community that will work with you and know it's important to invest in education, an institution like North Carolina A&T State University that graduates more Black engineers than any other institution in the country. When you're number one in the country with percentage of women in the tech workforce, those are the kinds of things that can move us forward. And I think an education governor has to connect our education system to business and make sure it works. Because when I talk to those CEOs, the top three issues that they have is workforce, workforce, and workforce. So education is going to be a key to success in business and in success for the people of the state.
Governor, thank you for sharing your insights with our RISE attendees today. In order to build a resilient education sector, we know it's important to strengthen connections both inside and outside of the field. It's clear that you've been doing just that, and we look forward to continuing to learn from you and our state of North Carolina. Thank you for your leadership. With that, I'll turn it over to our friends at the Reagan.